Welcome to the American Council on Exercise ACE Live webinar series. I'm your host, Araceli DeLeon, and I am the Product Development, Content, and Education Manager here at ACE. I'm so excited to welcome you. Thank you for returning if you are a returning pro, and if you are new, just some quick housekeeping rules before we get started and dive into today's topic. Just a couple of quick announcements and reminders. If you are an ACE professional, we have the ACE Pro Connect app 2.0 available on Apple device and Android devices. Along with the ACE Pro Compass, that is a free resource to all of our ACE professionals, and the ACE Times Wix website builder, where you can create your website, build your brand, and grow your business. And last but not least, the ACE job board, which is available to everybody. So whether you're an ACE professional or just a health and fitness professional in the industry, everyone is welcomed. You can upload your resume for free and connect with top level employers on the ACE job board seeking your help. And did you know that you can earn a $50 gift card? So yes, with the ACE Pros can now join the ACE Refer a Friend program. When you refer a health and fitness enthusiast like yourself and get rewarded when they purchase an ACE certification study program. As a gift from you, they'll get 10% off, so it's a win-win for each of you. Again, thank you for joining us for today's live webinar. Just a reminder that you are watching today's content for free via YouTube. So we appreciate you taking the time to join us during the live presentation. Remember, you won't be receiving continuing education credits for the course today unless you purchase the course with the link provided to you on your screen or your YouTube viewer. You can also purchase the course using the link description in the course below. And then once you purchase the course, you will receive a recorded version of today's webinar along with your 10-question quiz in your MyACE account. Once that quiz is passed, the 0.1 CECs will be awarded to you. So again, today's webinar is free, and this course will become available on Monday, March 24th. And because we always get this question, just a quick reminder that yes, you will receive a free recording to the email that you registered with today. So continue to have the conversation. Our presenter will be answering all of your questions at the end of today's presentation. So please be sure to type in your questions, your comments in the chat bar, and I will be monitoring those throughout the session. And because we are live, you can pause, rewind, and play at your leisure. And without further ado, next we'll be hearing from our presenter, Justin Robinson.
Thank you, Araceli. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. A very pleasant day to you, wherever you may be. Stoked to be here today, Justin Robinson. Also very happy Registered Dietitian Day to the other RDs out there. Here, everything I say today will be my own opinion. If we happen to, in the Q&A, discuss particular brands or products, I don't get paid by anybody to say anything, so free game there and just expressing my own opinion. A little on my background. I've been running ever since high school, like a lot of you out there, maybe some of your clients. I loved playing high school sports, was good, not great. And so that's actually what led me down the path of becoming a sports dietitian, as well as a personal trainer, strength conditioning coach, and then just enjoying some running myself and still trying to be competitive. So, excuse me. I'd like to start off today discussing how running is this third space. There's a great TED Talk by Jad Abumrad where he talks about being at a Dolly Parton concert and how this third space exists. And it's a group of individuals who otherwise would not be in that same space together. So you have the teenagers, the moms, the dad, the 20-somethings, the 40-somethings, the 60-somethings, the country people, the rock and roll people, all existing and interacting and having a good time at this concert. And it's just this really unique constellation. And running, interestingly, is a third space in that same vein, in that same respect, in that runners, if you show up to a half marathon or a marathon, you have young runners, old runners, in between, experienced, inexperienced. And so outside of our professional and personal lives, running is this third space. So as a coach, as a personal trainer, or maybe as a running coach, this can present challenges since a runner takes on many different shapes and forms. Unlike other sports, it's really not this very specific person or type of person with skills and abilities, but it's all over the place. In a good way, it presents positive challenges for us in the health, fitness, and wellness industry. So this morning, we'll go through some different challenges and different strategies to account for those challenges. We have 4 different client scenarios. So working with somebody who has joined a run club, working with a virtual client, a newish runner, and then an avid runner. And so with each of those, we'll have a case study, some practical examples. We'll have a lot of demonstrations of exercises today, so maybe throwing a few tools into your toolbox, but more importantly, working on strategies. So the exercises themselves are just techniques. But what I hope that you all get out of this today is a little different mindset or a little different approach to how you assess and then how you implement your training programs. Let's get into it. So here is a scenario. So you are a personal trainer, and you have a client who wants to run a half marathon, and so they join a run club. In San Diego, being nice out here and having a race almost every weekend, there are several run clubs, and so this is a pretty common scenario. And your client receives a workout from that coach that has running 5 days a week with 2 coached workouts. And the coach thinks that the client, your client, their athlete, doesn't really need to do anything except what's on the program. So they're not really apt to outside coaches or influences. Just stick to the program. That's all they need to do, follow the program. So how do you approach that? When someone just says follow the program. So some of the considerations. Most importantly, keeping everything you do focused on the client. So we have this athlete or client-focused programming. It's not about you. It's not about that run club coach. It's about the client. And so when you're assessing, reassessing, modifying things, the second question to ask would be really, what are they not getting from the run club? So if you currently work with that client 1 to 3 days a week, and you have a focus on aerobic fitness, you could probably pull that out of your training sessions because they're going to get plenty of aerobic fitness from running, from either following the program running on their own or from those 2 coached workouts per week. So maybe you focus a little bit more on mobility and strength, which will be most of the topics for today. And just importantly, maybe call the run club coach as well and have a conversation so that you avoid this turf war of, well, I know more than you and I've been doing this for how long and this is my client, not yours. Throw all that aside. Talk to the run club coach, ask about some of their background, ask about some of their philosophy as coaching, and then maybe get to the point of minimal effective dose. That is, what are the key workouts for the week? What are maybe some of those key distances throughout the week? And so here's an example of how we could modify a club program. So if you have run a half marathon with a club, you probably have an outline look similar to this. If you search online for a half marathon training program, it'll spit out something that looks very similar to this. So Monday, Wednesday, recovery runs. A recovery run is a light run. So it's at a slow to a moderate pace. You're not really focused on going fast or going long. It's just that 30, 40 minutes of easy running to stay fresh, as odd as that may sound. And then Tuesdays would be your interval-based workout, so maybe on a track, maybe hill repeats, but focusing more on the higher intensity with some rest in between the sets. A tempo run sometimes called a sub-threshold run, is that middle distance. So maybe 2 to 4 miles of running at a pretty fast pace, probably somewhere between a 5K and a 10K pace for most people. Very similar to what a race pace might be for a lot of individuals. And then some recovery, maybe some non-running cardio on Fridays or cross-training, a long run on Saturday, and then rest on Sundays. So again, this would be very typical of 1 session per day. Now, if your client has the ability to train multiple times throughout the day, we can modify that a little bit further. But let's assume they're like most of us and they have about an hour a day most days of the week to do their running and to train for this program. I suggest modifying the recovery runs because the key workouts will be the track or the interval-based workout, that sub-threshold or tempo run, and the long run. Those would be the key workouts. The other and probably most important key would be the recovery. So we don't want to mess too much with the active recovery on Fridays, and we don't want to mess too much with the rest on Saturdays. So that Monday, Wednesday is really our opportunity on the personal training or strength conditioning side to modify that program, because taking away one run for a strength session, probably not going to make or break that client. In fact, it'll probably benefit them because we know that strength training is a vital piece of performance as well as injury prevention. The most important thing we can get from strength training for an endurance athlete would be running economy, meaning that increasing the resiliency and the stiffness of muscles, tendons, and ligaments will actually allow us to have to internally produce less force, meaning that we can conserve some energy and have a little bit more bounce in the stride, particularly towards the latter portions of our run. So running economy is that term for just really conserving energy and, again, allowing muscles, bones, tendons, ligaments to have a little bit better physics. So Monday strength training session, maybe modifying the active recovery sessions to include a little bit more strength and mobility exercises. On the low end, I think people should be doing strength training every day for about 10 to 15 minutes. So at the very least, maybe you modify the warm-up and the cool-down so that they can get some of those benefits of mobility and strength. Having that full one-day session on Monday, though, I think could be pretty beneficial as well. So let's go ahead and get into some different movement exercises here, some examples. I don't want a slideshow full of a bunch of bullet points. We want to see people moving. So we're going to bring Nicole out. Nicole is an ACE pro and an avid runner, training for her 21st half marathon in a couple weeks here. So let's briefly talk about strength and how strength is a relative term. I define strength as moving through your basic movement patterns or progressive overload to the basic movement patterns in a sport-specific manner. So those basic movement patterns being squat, lunge, hinge, push, pull, rotate. And yes, depending on where your certification comes from, maybe those differ a little bit, but for the most part, we just want to provide some overload to those basic movement patterns and make it look like a runner. And so that's strength. Mobility is strength through range of motion. So mobility and strength coexist. You cannot have one without having the other. So before we do too much, let's warm up a little bit. I wrote an article that says what to do before running for ACE a few years ago, still very relevant. So we'll pull a few of those exercises. So the first one, we're going to do what we call a hamstring drive into a hip extension, or a static lunge, if you will. So she's just going to sit back onto her foot and reach out towards her toes there. Go ahead. Perfect. So she's getting a hamstring stretch on that left side, and now her arms are going to go overhead. Now we're getting some extension on that right hip. So you may have done a very similar exercise in yoga, kneeling with this particular movement pattern, but now we're doing it standing. There you see, good self-correction there. So she toed in on that back foot. When you see a client doing a lunge, if they rotate that toe out, they're getting artificial extension, if you will. Yeah, please switch sides. And they're getting it from that transverse plane rather than from the sagittal plane. So runners lack hip extension. I think every coach would agree with me to some extent. Perfect. Perfect. So when she reaches over, she's doing a great job. She's getting extension through the torso, extension through that hip. And when she reaches forward, that knee is straight but not fully locked out. So that's what we want to see. All right. And if somebody wobbles a little bit, that's perfect. Good. The next one, I mentioned 3 planes of motion. So sagittal is that front to back plane, transverse is a rotational plane, and then the frontal plane is side to side. When a runner's foot hits the ground, one of the very first movements that happen is called calcaneal eversion, which is a predominantly frontal plane movement. Yet when we warm up, we typically do all quads and hamstring stretches. Those are great, but we need to incorporate those other planes of motion. So this next exercise, warm-up activity, is a crossover lateral lunge. So right foot to the left side, she's going to squat down about halfway. Excellent. Left foot steps over to the right side. Again, just kind of squats down. Perfect. And then we would just do maybe 10 reps on each side. The feet should stay flat. And what happens is when the heels stay flat is we get that disassociation in the subtalar joint. So the ankle bone, the heel bone stays here, and then the shin goes a little bit to the side. And that's really what we're trying to drive with this particular movement. Awesome. All right, well, we're now warmed up. Let's get into some strength training. And when I say things like strength training and speed work for endurance athletes, it's a relative term. True strength training, textbook strength training, is 1 to 3 reps. So you're lifting as heavy as you can with very few repetitions and a lot of rest. I think that could set your clients up for failure if they're endurance athletes. So we use this term strength relatively, and when programming strength exercises, maybe 10 to 15 reps of body weight for a warm-up, and then your actual sets maybe in that 5 to 8 or 5 to 10 repetition set. Similarly, speed work does not have to be a full sprint, but maybe that 80% effort. So let's grab a kettlebell. And there are dozens of variations for a kettlebell squat. So we'll do this front squat variation. So she's going to have one arm up here, just resting the kettlebell on her shoulder. Perfect. Feet are shoulder width apart. She's going to sit down onto that imaginary chair behind her, keeping that core nice and strong. Perfect. So I like the front-loaded kettlebell here because we're getting a little bit more core activation. So this is an anterior chain exercise. A lot of work through the quads. Awesome. She's doing great. Let's challenge her a little bit, and let's go 2 kettlebells. So you could do 1 kettlebell, 5 to 10 reps on one, 5 to 10 reps on the other. So we'll go both guns blazing here. So shoulder width, nice squat. Perfect. And as these kettlebells get heavier, you have to engage that core a lot more. So if we're only strength training 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, we have to think how we can maximize that. So another example, awesome. We're going to go straight into the next exercise. So she's going to go hip width now. So we're going to go into RDLs or Romanian or stiff leg deadlifts. So just like in that warm-up activity, a very slight bend in the knee, and then she's just going to push her hips back as the weights come forward. Perfect. I don't care how, go ahead, just do a couple reps there. Excellent. So we call it a stiff leg deadlift because the knee is slightly flexed but maintains that same amount of flexion throughout the exercise. Depending on your client's low back mobility and stability, depending on their hamstring mobility and stability, they may only go, so go ahead and come down, they may only go this far, and that's okay. If they can get all the way to parallel with no pain, even better. All right, because she's such a stud, we're going to progress one more, and we're going to go to a single leg RDL. So she's going to do that same exercise standing on one foot. Slight bend in the knee. Again, a little bit of wobble is perfect because that means we're challenging the proprioceptive systems as well, which we'll get into a little bit later, important for runners. Awesome. And I actually find that you can rest there for a moment. I actually find that with the single leg RDL, 2 kettlebells, it provides more stability. So you can go same leg and go opposite with just 1, and that is actually a greater challenge. I like the 2 to start with. Great. Let's get a little bit of chest and shoulders. So for this next one, we're going to do an alternating shoulder press, and she's going to be in a running stride. So front knee is flexed, back leg is mostly straight, and then heels are slightly lifted. So we'll start with the kettlebells back up to the shoulders. She's going to get a little dip and then a press. Perfect. So you can see, again, if we're trying to save time, if we're trying to knock out multiple birds with the same stone, keep the kettlebells. She's getting core work while she's doing this. All right, let's go ahead and switch your feet. And then let's show one more variation going through the transverse plane. So she's going to dip, and this time when she drives, she's going to rotate and then press. Good. Dip and come across. So you can almost call this an uppercut punch if you want to. Awesome. Let's do one more. So let's pause here in the middle, and then this time, dip, press, and rotate the opposite way. So you can call this a 3-way or 4-way exercise, but I love this one because we're getting extension and rotation through the core. And if you think about what happens with a runner, especially in a longer stride, the core is extending and rotating. So we're working on producing force and then also decelerating and transferring that force. All right. Awesome work. So you can set that down. We'll see Nicole here again in just a few minutes. So the best thing to do with this type of client is incorporate those strength training exercises into their warm-up, into their cool down, 15 to 20 minutes a day, and or have that full training session 1 day a week. Let's move on to the next scenario here. So coaching a virtual client. So maybe this is someone who you've worked with in the past. They were injury prone. You helped them work through a lot of different injuries, and they trust you, but they live in a different state. And now they want to train for a marathon, and they have a coach or they have a program, but they want your expertise to modify it and just make sure they're doing everything in the right way. So they reconnect and they say, hey, can you help me incorporate some strength training into this marathon training program because I know that I'm going to pull a hammy. So the best piece of advice I can give with this is avoiding one-way communication. And what I mean by that, whether you're a running coach who's programming an endurance program, a triathlon coach doing the same, or a personal trainer writing a strength program, avoid writing the program, putting it out there, and expecting that client to follow it. So that one-way communication is incredibly ineffective. So you have to consider how you can obtain some feedback from your client, and even if you have multiple virtual clients, how you can individualize a program for them. I talk a lot about this 80-20 rule, and it applies to so many different aspects of life. But they're probably going to get about 80% of what they need from that training program, from a run club coach. So that other 20% is your expertise. So don't feel like you have to do everything for this client. Just in your assessments, in knowing what they excel at, in knowing some of the weaker links in their chain, what is that 20% that you can interject as an expert so that they can stay on the road? There are several different apps that can help you achieve this. So that would be my recommendation, is to find a platform, web-based, phone app-based platform that allows you to get some of that feedback. So this is a screenshot from Train Heroic, one of those apps. And what they can do is if you program a strength training workout, they do the workout, they can put in exactly how many reps and sets they completed, whether or not they completed all the workout. And then there's also subjective information, which is equally important to the objective. So objective, I did this, I didn't do this. Subjective, it was easy, it was moderate, it was hard. Subjective, I slept like crap last night, or I feel energized and ready to go. And most of these apps will have some algorithm to take those metrics and give you some sort of a fit score, recovery score. And you just want to modify the program so that they stay within a particular zone and so that they're not overly worked from adding strength training on top of their endurance training, but rather those pieces are integrated. So having that web-based platform, I think is pretty crucial to have some of that feedback from the client. And then most importantly, not just taking that feedback and saying, well, you're not doing it right, stick to the program, but taking that feedback and then actually making modifications. Next scenario here. So a newish runner, and this is maybe where most of us have the most experience, or should say the type of client we've seen most often. So maybe this is somebody who is just discovering running. Maybe they're rediscovering running. They ran track in high school or played basketball and soccer in high school, but haven't run before or haven't run in 10 or 15 years. And they want to train for a race, may or may not run again after that 5K or 10K. So what are some of the challenges that we see here, and what are some of the different capacities you can incorporate as a coach? So the most important thing, and as a registered dietitian, I think building habits is so crucial to having a beneficial and healthy nutritional lifestyle, that if you want this client to do well on that race and incorporate running without being injured or without feeling overwhelmed, build habits. I have the famous quote of 20 minutes is better than no minutes. And so if we can build quality into their workouts, we can get them to enjoy what they do, then maybe they can go from being somebody who runs into a runner. So enjoyment comes from success. So we'll talk about some assessments here in just a moment. And those assessments demonstrate your effectiveness. And you know this as a personal trainer, that if somebody's reps and sets are increasing and they're getting stronger and feeling better, they're more likely to come back to you. And so we need to think of some running-specific strength tests to incorporate to demonstrate that effectiveness. Push-ups, probably not the best example. If somebody is trying to get stronger in the upper body, push-ups are a great assessment. But I would say that over a 12-week endurance-based training program, that if somebody goes from 15 to 17 push-ups as their max, it's probably not going to demonstrate your effectiveness as a personal trainer. So push-ups or an upper body pure strength exercise may not be the best choice. And then running specific strength and power. Again, strength, power, speed being relative terms. I love Olympic lifting, so I love variations of Olympic lifting, but somebody does not have to clean and snatch to increase their power, especially as a new runner. So relative terms there. So let's bring Nicole back out and briefly discuss running. So what is running? Well, those of you who've taken an anatomy physiology class probably learned at some point that running is controlled falling. Walking, running, controlled falling. So I fall forward, my foot hits the ground. Yes, I need mobility in this foot. Yes, I need strength and stability. But for the most part, this front leg is decelerating my mass and my momentum. And for the most part, my back leg is working through extension and then acceleration through that push-off. So as a coach, we want to work those elements into our warm-up, into our strength training. So we're going to start off with what's called a pivot lunge. So her left foot's going to stay glued to the ground. She's going to step forward with the right foot, just like a standard lunge. Good. Heel flat, knee forward, butt back. Perfect. And then switch and go straight back to there. Excellent. So let's do a few rounds of this. Now, she's doing a great job here, and as she steps forward, she's keeping that back leg mostly straight. A lot of the times when people do a lunge, they'll bend both knees. That's not wrong. That's just not running specific because you're not getting enough extension through that opposite hip. Awesome. All right, let's tweak it just a little bit, and let's add an exaggerated arm stride to this. So, yeah, think, okay, what foot was just forward? I get it. I do the same thing. All right, so she's there, good. Now, I talk a lot about tweaking. Tweaking up means making something harder. Tweaking down means making it easier. If somebody's really struggling with balance here, she can toe touch in between. So just go ahead and do that. There you go. Toe touch there, and then do that backwards lunge, and then come forward and toe touch. So you have a little bit of a reset in between each round. If we want to tweak it up and make it a little more challenging, we can add external load. So think about the ACE mover method, and that once somebody has a proper range of motion and a proper speed, we can make it a little faster or add some external load. So we'll go with the medicine ball, and we'll go through two variations on this. So she's going to reach forward, go and reach to right in front of your knee as you press down. So reach down a little bit farther. There you go. So as she reaches down right in front of the knee, in each case, we're incorporating a little more glute max. So there you go. Perfect. Now, one of the challenges, go ahead and rest, give you a quick break. One of the challenges I see, especially with new runners, is not necessarily glute strength, but glute medius strength or lack thereof. So you can do a sideline plank or some of the different sideline isolation exercises as a corrective. But again, we're runners. We want to do things standing up. So when she does this pivot lunge this time, she's going to rotate away from that front leg. So go ahead and step out, twist away, the other side, good. And then she's going to go backwards, do the same thing, good. So excellent, better that time. So I said better even though her knee went down and in. We want to see that. We want to see that valgus movement of the knee adducting, flexing, and hip and knee flexion there. So good, because what we do is when you have that opposite side rotation, we essentially take the glute maximus out of the exercise. And so as I decelerate and then accelerate knee flexion and extension, I have to use the glute medius. And so this is, again, a great warm-up, a great strength training exercise, particularly for newish runners. Let's do one more similar exercise. So she's going to stand here, do a single leg squat, and then go a back diagonal reach. Again, about a half range of motion squat. Rotate out, good. And then come back up nice and tall, perfect. Always finishing nice and tall, getting that full hip extension as best we can. Nice job. She's controlling that valgus. Excessive valgus or uncontrolled valgus, bad. Controlled valgus of that knee diving down, and you could let that knee dive in just a little bit more, is something that we actually want to teach runners how to do, especially if you are working with any sport athletes where they have to plant and cut. We often get hurt doing fast and explosive movements when the muscles, for lack of better description, don't know what to do. So if we can teach that glute medius to decelerate that internal knee rotation, then we're a little bit more injury resistant. All right, great. So we did the single leg squat. The next one is a pistol squat. So you can go ahead and set that down. So the pistol squat, and we'll just do a very quick demo of it today, is a great, or a modified pistol squat 2 box, whatever you want to call it, is a great assessment tool. So we'll just pretend there's a box here, and you want to go to about 120 degrees of knee flexion. So not all the way to 90, but also not just a few inches down. And then she's going to pretend like there's that box behind her, right leg straight, all the weight is through the left heel, arms out in front of you. And then every time she touches that box, I'll have a stopwatch here. And every time she touches the box, I count a rep. So if we do that for 30 seconds, man, she could probably go a minute. So if we did that for a minute each leg, we would have that score. And then as she gets stronger, as her muscular endurance and proprioceptive systems improve through our training programs, excellent. Yeah, everybody's great at those for like 5 or 6 reps, and then it starts to kick in. So that's why it's such a great assessment tool to use. So awesome, thank you so much. Let's keep moving on here. So with the beginners, again, it's about incorporating things into their daily routine and building some of those habits. Shifting gears here just a little bit more to an avid runner. So now you have somebody who running fast is not the issue. Running often is not the issue. They love to run. The problem is, though, they're probably really good at running in a straight line. And so maybe because of running in a straight line, and because they have so much overusage, maybe they have a lot of injuries, either chronic, nagging injuries, things that won't go away. And so as somebody who is an avid runner, again, the common theme here is to ask yourself as a coach, what are they not getting from their training program? What are they not? What is that other 20%, that other 10% that they are not getting from running on a track, pounding the pavement, hitting the hills? So mitigating overuse, and we do that through, again, considering minimal effective dose. So minimal effective dose, a good example of this might be a long run. If somebody is trying to get very running-specific aerobic adaptations, increasing mitochondrial density, all those things we learned in textbooks, running 8 miles or running 10 miles is probably more effective than running 5. But the difference between 8 and 9 or between 9 and 10 is probably not that much of a difference. So at some point you may have to ask yourself, when are we just getting minutes that really don't matter And then when are we getting the adaptation that we really want to achieve? So maybe taking something like a 10-mile run, taking that down to a 9, maybe 8 to 9 miles, and then taking those extra 10 or 15 minutes and doing some mobility exercises. That way we have this comprehensive program. We're taking away just a little bit of their overusage, incorporating some of the components and movement patterns that they may be lacking, but we're not taking anything away from their training. So that's something to consider. Athleticism. Avid runners, not always the best athletes. I've worked a lot with triathletes. I was a triathlete for many years myself, so I feel okay making fun of them. Some of the worst ladder drills I've ever seen are from triathletes. And so there's definitely something to working that general athleticism. Again, not in the same way you would with a football player. We don't have to focus on speed and agility 6 hours a week, but 8 minutes a day, 3 days a week, consistently can provide some of the general athleticism. Rewinding. This is a literal and a figurative term. So the concept of rewinding is just taking them through the opposite of what their training does. So that may literally be on a treadmill, walking backwards for 2 or 3 minutes at the end of a training session, or maybe at the end of each interval. It could also be something like hip extension. So again, working with a lot of cyclists over the years, cyclists sit in this hip flexed position. And so a debate might be, well, if I want sport-specific strength, I need to get them really strong in this range of motion. I won't argue with that. But the concept of rewinding would say, well, because they spend all day here in my training session with them, maybe I want to take them through some of that hip extension because it's something that they don't get through their training. So keep those concepts in mind that sometimes you want to be hyper-specific and get somebody to do exactly what that run looks like or that movement pattern looks like, and sometimes you want to do the opposite. So again, with runners, deceleration of that front foot, extension through that back hip, extension through the torso, really something that they lack. Further, we think of running as a sagittal plane movement, even though it incorporates all three, but most runners in their training will predominantly train in the sagittal plane. So we want to make sure that we challenge and incorporate frontal plane and transverse plane movements. So let's get into a few more demonstrations here. And just quickly, we can bring Nicole back out one more time. So with these next few rounds of exercise, we'll go through 3 planes of motion, but we'll also do things slow and fast. So all of our muscles have proprioceptors. And some of those proprioceptors respond to slow changes in bending, flexing, extending, and some respond to fast changes. So if this is something like my Achilles heel, I want to make sure that I work that Achilles in the frontal plane, in the transverse plane, and then definitely in that sagittal plane. But I also want to do movements that are quick, and then I actually want to do some movements that are slow, and certainly you could get in and do some of the soft tissue work to try to shut down some proprioceptors at certain times so that you can get a little bit more mobility. But consider when somebody pulls that hamstring or that calf. It's probably not from the jog on the treadmill. It's probably from the track workout. It's probably from doing the speed and agility stuff. So if we never incorporate those, if all we ever do is long, slow distance running, we get good at long, slow distance running, but we don't really set up any injury prevention. So we'll go through a few exercises here. We'll do some slow, some fast. We'll incorporate a little bit of plyometrics. Again, plyometrics are a relative training term, maybe 2 to 3 days a week for just a few exercises, as opposed to a soccer player where maybe doing full 40 to 60-minute plyo sessions. All right, so the first one, go ahead and grab the hip band there. So she's going to take a rubber band, or there's the padded ones, it doesn't really matter. And I love this as a warm-up before something like a track workout or just before early in a strength training session. So the progression here, the first one, she's going to take a tiny step back, maybe a quarter squat, and then just come up nice and tall. So maybe just about 3 reps on each side with that one. So toe touch that back foot, come up, just drive the knee to about parallel. Excellent. Keeping that weight through this left heel. When you squat down, there you go. Keep the weight through that heel too. Perfect. All right, the next one, we're just going to go a little deeper into that squat and then a little higher with that knee drive. The other thing she's trying to do here, and she's doing great with it, is keeping tension on those bands. So you may have to go a little bit wider of a stance than feels comfortable, or push out on the hip just to keep the band in place. Perfect. All right, one more. Now we'll get a little more speed. So quick, and then come up and actually get a little bit of a heel raise on that planted foot. And notice the arms are going a little bit more too. Perfect, yeah. And if we get a little wobbly, that's fine. Doing great. So you can see how pretty quickly we progress through slow to fast, and then yeah. And if they have it, if they've been doing this for a while, you can even get a little bit of a hop onto that single leg, but we could save that for another day if you'd like. So that is the hip band step-ups or hip band knee drives, either term. Let's grab the medicine ball here, and we're going to go through a two-way RDL. So we already saw an RDL where we lengthened the hamstrings. We worked on some of that deceleration of knee extension. We're going to do that same thing and just show how we can go straight into hip extension as well. So one foot's on the ground. She's going to reach forward or reach down as you kick that back leg up. So again, we're getting that lengthening through the back hips here. And this time she's going to come up and reach up and behind. So now we're almost making that big bow and really getting some hip extension and torso extension. So perfect. There we go. And using that other foot for balance as much as needed. Trying to keep the thigh, the calf, and the torso all as a board. So it's almost, we used to call these teeter-totters where I worked before. Awesome. All right. Now we're going to challenge her, and we're going to make her do that same thing just a little bit faster. So now we're working different proprioceptors, same pattern, but at a different speed. So just go a little bit faster through that. There it is. And one thing you'll notice here, she's challenging herself. She's trying to do the same range of motion, but it's okay to do a little bit less range of motion. So think through the ACE mover method, and that as you tweak up, as you make something harder, she's been working hard today, so the heart rate's already up. That's perfect. So as you make one component of the activity harder, you may have to back off a little bit. So if we add speed to the movement, if we add external load, maybe we have to bring down the range of motion. And that's okay, because we're going to progress, and eventually, through weeks and weeks of training, maybe get to the point where she could touch that ball all the way to the ground and then overhead in what looks like a very explosive movement pattern. But meet your clients where they're at and constantly tweak and modify. All right, we got two more. So we could set this down. Thank you. You're doing awesome today. Let's grab this glider. Really just a $2.99 furniture mover. But if I could pick one exercise for runners, it would probably be this one, either as a warm-up or even as a strength training exercise. And if you know me by now, you know that when I say one, I really mean three, because we have to go sagittal, frontal, and transverse planes. So she's going to do just a single leg squat on the glider. All the weight in this case is through the left foot. She's going to squat down and reach backwards with that other foot. Great. Come up nice and tall. Reach out to the side. Great. And then do that back diagonal. So again, now we're putting a lot of things together here. We're getting that hip extension. She's probably feeling a good adductor stretch here, getting that frontal plane. And then we're getting, again, an adductor stretch, but also that glute medius with this one. Perfect. And so maybe 5 reps in each direction, building up to 10, maybe making it a little bit more explosive at some point. There she goes, getting some speed now, like that. And then we could add the kettlebells. We could add a medicine ball. So we could add a weight vest and get some of that external load. But that glider matrix, if you want to call it that, or single leg squat with a glider, probably my favorite exercise for runners. All right, I talked about plyos. Let's go ahead and do one more exercise, which again means 3. So this is called the jump matrix, and we're working on quickness or a little bit of agility, but as well as deceleration, 2 essential components for runners. So she's going to jump forward, decelerate, get it quick in the middle, decelerate to the side, quick, and then decelerate in that rotational or transverse plane. Quick, control, back to forward, quick, control, to the side, back diagonal, perfect. All right, well done. And so that's maybe something that we could do 5 in each direction on each side, and Again, something like that at the end of a warm-up, right before a track workout, great way to get the neuromuscular prep. Doing that with a weight vest for 3 rounds, great way to have a true 10-minute, 15-minute plyometric training session. So awesome job today. Thank you for all of your effort. Let's try to piece this all together here. So this is the ACE mover method, and as we've discussed with those last few examples of the muscular training side, that if we start with qualitative movement, we want people to squat, lunge, push, pull, rotate well, and to make it look fluid without pain. We can add speed, we can add complexity to the movement, we can add an external load, we could do all 3, but just keep in mind that you might have to bring down one of those. So if you have that complex jump matrix and we're adding weight, maybe we only do 1 plane at a time, and then we eventually build up the complexity. Tying this into runners, if you have somebody who's new to the sport of running, the base level of training here is really just time on feet. And what I mean by that is in their running programming, I don't care about how far they go. I don't care how fast they go. We're just trying to accomplish getting out there and running for 30 minutes, for 60 minutes, 90 minutes as we progress. So time on feet is the term we use particularly very early on in a cardiorespiratory training program. As someone becomes a little bit more aware of themselves and aware of some of their abilities and increases that running economy, now we can start talking about different gears or different paces. So, hey, all right, you have a race pace, and so now I want you to do your tempo run for 2 miles at your target race pace. And then on our Saturday longer run is going to be time on feet, just at whatever pace. Elite runners have different gears. So they may have 7 or 8 different gears, and within a few seconds, they know the difference between a 1 mile pace, a 5K pace, 10K, half marathon, marathon, ultra run pace. And so again, just assessing your client, figuring out where they're at so that you can use terminology to meet the client to best serve them. So summarizing this all, client-centered, assess, meet them where they're at. That's true to strength training as well as running. Here's some different articles and resources. And we have some time for Q&A now, so I appreciate everybody tuning in today. This is the Mission Trails 5 Peaks Challenge. The true challenge is doing it all in 1 day, so this was peak number 5 for me a few years back. And that's a challenge to you on some day. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Nicole. And just some quick reminders, everyone, if you're interested in earning CECs for today, there are a few ways, is by visiting the link that is shown here on your screen or the link in your ACE YouTube viewer. So again, today's presentation is free, and you will get an email with the recording of the presentation. However, if you want to earn the CECs, purchase the quiz, pass the quiz, and that will be all updated in your My ACE account. And if you enjoyed today's topic, today's session, and would like to expand your learning on cardiovascular training or running, there are already a couple of courses available for you today on the ACE website as well. All right, without further ado, let's get into some of the questions that you have all been asking throughout today's presentation. Nice. First of all, Nicole, thank you so much. Everybody in the comments and in the chat has applauded your form, and everybody's very impressed with your running. So thank you for thank you for participating, and thank you, Justin, for taking her through some of those exercises, which to a lot of us were completely brand new and we're trying for the first time yesterday. So I appreciate that. And when you started the presentation, you were talking about third spaces. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about third spaces in relation to run clubs, and maybe why we are now seeing such a uptick in people joining run clubs or taking up running. What, from your experience as a running coach and as a runner, what can you tell us more about those third spaces?
Yeah, again, I think the idea of a third space is that everybody's there for a different reason. But it's common in that everybody is there and running. But if you polled 10 people, 3 people might say, well, I'm here just because I want to get in shape. Next 3 people might say, I'm here because I just want to be social and I want to talk to people. And next 3 people is, I'm here to get away from the household and get away from the kids and I don't care what it is. So I think that's what's pretty unique about it. And I think that's what makes running and cycling and triathlon, swimming great sports. But again, it makes it challenging because as a coach, we think about results. We think, I want to make you as fast as possible. But I think you have to realize that not everybody's there just to get fast. I mean, a quick story, in my 20s, I didn't fully understand when people would say things, I want to do a race just to finish. I'm like, well, yeah, you want to finish, but you want to,
don't you care about your
don't you care about your time,
and,
whatever.
Yeah.
And then now 20 years later, doing a little bit more of like ultra running, I'm like, I literally just want to finish.
Yes.
And yeah, sure, I have
survive it.
Just survive it. And so I didn't have that empathy or that understanding earlier on. And so I think that's what we can do, again, as a run coach, maybe even just as a training partner, just have that level of empathy and understand that, hey, yeah, there's 100 people here at this run club, but for 20 different reasons.
100%. I can attest to being one of the more social runners now, having ran in high school, joining a run club for almost a year now. And it's just been such a great way to get to know people in my community. And yeah, you're totally right. There's people who are coming with, I signed up for a half marathon, I signed up for a 10K, and there's people who are like, I just want to drink the beer at the end of the session.
My drinking club has a running problem,
Yeah, exactly. So some other questions, though, thank you for getting into that for the third space, are for those people who have anything with low back issues or chronic pain or pain in the low back. What other tips or exercises and things can they do for preventing either low back pain or kind of diminishing some of that?
Good question. And again, this is where, to tout personal trainers, this is where a personal trainer or strength conditioning coach comes in, because most people, when they have pain, they stop doing that thing. And that's not the answer. The answer is to do that thing in a modified way. And then to assess, well, what's causing that pain initially. And so with runners, again, the quick 3 might be something like ankle mobility, glute medius, and then posterior chain strength. So people might look at that RDL exercise and be like, oh, my back would explode if I did that. And I might look at it and say, well, it's because your low back and your hamstrings are not as strong as they should be. So we should be doing that exercise, but maybe very, very low weight and through a low range of motion in very controlled patterns. So
there you go.
Avoiding is not always the answer, but modifying is the best approach.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about meeting your clients where they're at.
Precisely.
So where can we progress and modify throughout that program? Beautiful. And to piggyback on that, for our moms who run with strollers, any experience or tips to not end up with a super sore or tight upper back, shoulders with running with a stroller? Any experience or tips with that?
Oh, that's a good question. I think you have to treat it in the same way that you would any external load. So starting with shorter runs, and just like you would with a running vest, don't run 6 miles the very first time you throw on a weight vest. Run a mile. And so having some of that, I wouldn't do every run with it, incorporate it into the running, because it's not just a matter of that extra force that you're pushing, but your running stride is probably going to be a little bit different. You might not be able to drive your knees up because you're not going to hit the stroller with your knees, or you only have one arm or you don't have 2 arms. So progression.
Beautiful. And with your experience in training runners and triathletes, any experience with pool training? I know there was a question here around anything around pool training or anything that folks can do with that.
Yeah, great stuff. So in 2 ways, again, if we think back through that workout plan, we had like the active recovery days. So if somebody has the low back, the knee thing, and they can only run 2 days a week, then we have to think about where we're going to get the running specific movements as well as the aerobic fitness. So just swimming, cycling, great ways to get aerobic fitness. So that may be one piece of it. Yeah, but running in the pool, I think might be a great way to deload the system so that you can still get some of the neuromuscular patterns developed. But it's not a one-for-one substitute. It might be taking 4 days a week down to 2 days a week of running. But if you plan to run a 5K or a 10K, you still need that sport-specific time on feet.
Okay. And we have time for one more here. Anything around, so with the strength training, right, and running and incorporating strength training, are these able to, the strength training, could they be used as part of the cool down, or do you still recommend to have a proper individualized cool down session apart from the strength training? I think folks are trying to see how much can I overlap here with my training.
No, I think we get into this mode of, I'm going to go run. So I'm going to stretch my quads, stretch my hamstring, jog, and then when I come back, I'm going to lay down on the ground and do my stretches. I don't want to say throw that out, but we certainly can do a more pyramid type of approach where you start slow. Maybe you start on the ground and then work your way to a kneeling and then standing and then you're running. And then reverse that. So yes, I absolutely think you can come back from a run, do maybe like the pivot lunge, and then maybe go down to like a kneeling, and then do your butterfly stretch. So absolutely incorporating the bookends there as your strength training mobility sessions.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you everybody for joining today. We will continue to answer some of these questions regarding CCs and where to access all that wonderful information. Thank you, Justin, so much. And thank you, Nicole, for continuing to have the conversation and expanding on the topic as well. And just some quick tidbits of information here, just some reminders for you all. If you are an ACE professional, we have a plethora of free resources available to you today, including the ACE Pro Connect app, the ACE Job Board, ACE Pro Compass, as well as the ACE Plus Wix website. And when you refer a friend, with the Refer a Friend program, you have the opportunity to earn a $50 gift card, and your friend gets a 10% discount on the continuing education study programs. It's a win-win for each of you. All right, and upcoming, already live for registration next month, please join Lauren Schroyer. She'll be speaking on AI in fitness, the next frontier for coaches. And this is happening on Wednesday, April 16th at 11 a.m. here on YouTube Live. And again, you don't want to miss this conversation. We're so excited to have Lauren present on this topic. And let's get the conversation continuing on our ACE socials, on the ACE Pro Connect app. Thank you for joining us today. Let's get people moving.